Good afternoon, everybody. Today's battle rhythm, the Pathfinder Project, Disability Inclusive Pathways into Corporate Careers for Veterans with Disabilities, is being hosted by Dee Ingram. Dee is the Community Engagement and Partnership Coordinator for the network at America's Warrior Partnership. The network provides local veteran-serving organizations with connections to national resources when a veteran's request cannot be met locally. The URL for the network is on your screen. Please visit it sometime. But that's it for me. Dee, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, affiliate communities, 4-Star Alliance members, veteran service organizations, and guests. Our agenda today is, like Allison said, the Pathfinder Project. Veterans with disabilities bring exceptional skills, leadership, and resilience to the civilian workforce, yet many remain unemployed in corporate roles. The battle rhythm here will explore success factors and lead to success, sustainable employment for corporations and for veterans with disabilities based on disabled veteran-led research. Today, we have an exciting panel of experts to provide insight and information about resources for disability inclusive pathways into corporate careers for veterans with disabilities. So I'd like to welcome today's guest, Louis Olander, Ph.D., Director of Research and Veteran Initiatives at Disability In, Chad Johnson, Vice President of Thought Leadership at Fidelity Investments and a Marine veteran, Lisa Stern, EDD, former Director of Programs, Impact and Assessment at FourBlock. So please feel free to add questions and thoughts in the chat box, as Allison said. I will read them and we will get them out to our excited guests.
Before you turn it over to Louis, can we share our poll? It looks like we have almost a 50-50 split between for-profit and nonprofit, so welcome everybody. And we have a few from education schools type organizations, and a couple from a club, an association, and a few that are representing their own families in here today. So that's what we have.
I'm going to turn it over to Louis.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's great to see so many folks. I was just looking through the chat. I'm happy to see so many of the Pathfinders themselves in this call, which is exciting and wonderful for me personally, because I've spent a lot of time with a lot of folks having these conversations that are leading up to this. Today, we're talking about disability inclusive pathways into corporate careers. And again, for veterans with disabilities. That said, this is a part of a much larger study that looks at a range of success factors for veterans and how they can make the most of their transition in a lot of ways, and also what lessons can be learned from veterans who have successfully navigated that transition. So a little bit about the study, because the study I'll come to in just a moment, but it is a different type of approach, a different type of look than a lot of research, because we're really starting with good stories, places where folks have landed with success, so that we could learn from them what those success factors are, what's driving success. And this is a very stark contrast to a lot of academic research, which looks at what's wrong and what are the problems and how do we fix things, usually fixing people. And I think as we go through, I think we'll be clear how this is different. So we're going to start off with a video that features our panelist here, Chad Johnson. It's a 6-minute video, and then we'll get into the presentation of the research.
Hello? Tell me about Chad Johnson.
Chad Johnson, where to begin?
Was this innate feeling, I think, that Chad holds within himself. This idea that perhaps he's not worthy.
Rocking to the ton, baby! All the way from Iwo Jima. Raise some money for TMF along the way and bring honor and glory back to the Marine Corps. Rah!
Being a Marine was probably the greatest thing that I ever did. I just had this unwavering desire that freedom wasn't free. And I felt like that I needed to pay that back. And I just couldn't shake that feeling that I had. I was in for 4.5 years. I was in Iraq in '03. For me, it was when I put that uniform on, it's with a sense of pride. And I did that every single day that I was in because I had that much respect for those men and women that came before me. My wife and I wanted to have kids at the time, so at that point I decided that it was my time to get out. So that was in late 2004. At the time we moved to Raleigh. I started my career at Fidelity and I felt lost. We're still trying to figure out what's next. Like when you're in the military, you're one of those guys, right? If something goes down, somebody calls you, you're the guy that takes care of it. But then when you get out, I didn't know how to handle that.
So like when you wake up in the morning and look at yourself in the mirror and you really don't like what's looking back at you and you don't know how to fix that, and then you like kind of stumble through your day and you're thinking, it wouldn't matter if I was gone. It wouldn't matter if I didn't show up to work. It wouldn't matter if I didn't come home because my life isn't worth the extra energy.
22 veterans still take their own lives in this country every day. You wake up and you don't know where you are. You have dreams about things that you've seen or things that you've done, and you don't sleep well.
You stand on the edge of a high building and you're like, I could jump. Or a bridge saying, it wouldn't matter. Like, normal people don't think like that.
And so what gets you through that, what moves you to the other side?
First and foremost, thank you everyone for being here for the 2025 9/11 Heroes Run for the Travis Bandy Foundation.
Post-service, I always felt like my desire to serve hasn't ever changed. I've always wanted to give back to my community. When I found out what TMF was and what their mission was, it was something that resonated with me highly. I got involved pretty quickly. I look at the Travis Bandy Foundation as a badge of honor. When I put this logo on, I have to be my best self. I have to be the best I can be because it matters. I have an opportunity to show the world, and even on a small scale, like just how incredibly important positive character can be. And I know that like if somebody hadn't taken time to do that for me when I needed it, I don't know where I'd be.
One of the things that I love about Chad is while he may come off as like the hard Marine guy a lot of the times, he loves people and he invests in people. And that's where he likes to give his time. This has given him a place to do that consistently. He always comes back and he tells me some story about someone that he seems to care very deeply about. And so that's really awesome. It's really awesome. It gives him purpose. It gives him an avenue to give back. He actually wanted to go back into the Marines much later in life, and he feels like he missed an opportunity to continue to serve. And so now he gets that chance.
You know, survivor's guilt is real. And so having to face that as a service member, knowing that incredible men and women have lost their lives, and to think back, like, why am I still here? Why am I the one that was spared? Like, that's tough. That's a hard thing to live with. Being part of this organization helps me deal with that, helps me through that, and through some of the vulnerability, I found strength. They've treated me like family since the very beginning, and they've allowed me to figure out what, you know, true humility is, what it means to be humble.
Everything Chad does is to take care of someone else. You know, he helps you feel like you belong.
His heart and his passion for others definitely stands out.
You're absolutely a great example of someone who truly embodies, if not me, then who, in everything that they do.
You are worthy. You are not an imposter. You are the real deal, Marine.
Semper Fidelis, Chad.
Love you, Chad.
Love you, brother.
And I love you, too.
I don't know that I would still be here if I hadn't found the Travis Bandy Foundation. All of this is about making the world a better place for those around me than it was when I inherited it. I want to continue to serve because I still feel like there's work to be done.
So thank you all, and in particular, thank you to Chad. The video is I think this is the first time, Chad, I've watched it, not gotten choked up. I usually get a little bit in the throat, but not today. Thank you for sharing that piece of your story. I think it really provides a great set of context for all of these findings that I'm about to share about disability and how veterans understand their disability in the workforce. So just again, a little piece about the study. We call it the Pathfinder Project because Pathfinders in the Army are the folks who are trained to go first, right? To drop behind enemy lines, set up drop zones, set up landing zones, so creating conditions for others to follow. So in this study, we've looked at veterans who have successfully navigated that transition and have embraced disability as pathfinders who are able to help us find new pathways and new drop zones and new landing zones into corporate employment. We really believe that studying these pathways allows us to build systems, right? We have a lot of things that are one-off, help a person here, help a person there, and that is incredibly valuable. And in fact, we'll talk about the value of peer support in this process, but we also need to think about building systems that allows consistent, meaningful employment outcomes, because we know that those are linked to positive health outcomes and stability. Unlike, and I mentioned this earlier, unlike a lot of research, this has an affirmative focus. We're not looking to find what's wrong. We're not looking to find problems and deficits. We're really looking to find where success happens. And in particular on unexpected and less well-known avenues, especially when we talk about career fields and job titles, which is going to be something that comes out in the next phase of the research. But the big question was, how do service-connected disabilities interact with the transition process? At this time, I'm going to ask Chad to read the quotes in italics off to the side. Those of you who participated in the study, and a few of you I see here, thank you so much for coming through. I just wanted to give Chad your voice for a moment, if that's all right.
Yeah, so I really want people to understand that veterans with disabilities are functioning people. We are not laid up in a corner somewhere. We want to do good. We want to be good, and we're really trying to make it work. And that's where we're not being treated differently matters. I think it's a really big thing.
Yeah. So when we look at the findings overall for the study, and just another little piece, this is a multi-phase study that goes from interviews all the way to scale implementation. So we're relatively early days in this research. But some of the emerging findings that we have are that successful veterans often accepted roles with less responsibility than they had in the military in order to take time to prove their value and earn promotions. We also know that successful veterans bring highly developed in-demand soft skills to work, especially the willingness to learn and adaptability in knowledge and skills. And another real central finding that we're not going to spend too much time on today, but we will certainly in this research be looking to strengthen this finding, is that thriving at work for disabled veterans really does hinge on organizational culture. So we're going to zoom in really to what the findings are about disability and how veterans with disabilities who are thriving in the workforce came to terms with their own disability. And this is really something that is underexplored and under-researched. So often we know that veterans are reluctant to talk about a disability, but often the conversation stops there. So we're hoping to pick apart some of the findings here and start thinking about other ways that we can understand how veterans understand their disability. And I'll turn it to you, Chad, to give voice.
Yep. My perception of disabled veterans was that they were living a much harsher lifestyle than I would have had to live because they were unfortunate. They didn't come home with everything intact the way a lot of us did. I always hold them in a high regard because I recognized the tough, rough spots that they were going through.
So a lot of veterans, when they joined the service, had a lot of the same stereotypes, had a lot of the same understandings that civilians do of disability, right? And of disabled veterans themselves, right? So we very often heard people talk about, alcoholic, amputee, Vietnam vet, wheelchair user, all of these things were part of the stereotype that many people certainly have in their heads about disabled veterans, but also that the veterans held about other disabled veterans before they joined the service, before they themselves became disabled. And if you would please, Chad.
Yep. Same thing when they ask about a disability. In the military, you do a physical every year. For me, 32 years to be exact. You go in, you want to keep your full-time job, right? You have all these pains, you've had surgeries, you've been rocketed, you've been mortared, you've been this and you've been that. And they ask, how's everything? And you usually say, I'm fine.
So this is a common experience we see among veterans, not necessarily the 32 years piece, because service ranges in length in a number of ways. But the one thread that was very consistent is that virtually every veteran we talked about not wanting to sort of concede that they were hurt, not wanting to concede that there were injuries, that there were things that were slowing them down. And the primary issue there was not even pride so much as it was wanting to continue to be a contributor to a unit, right? So in the military, often being a contributor is highly valued, and being a drain on a unit is highly devalued. And so when you take this combined with the last finding, right? So disabled veterans are often coming out and becoming disabled with this real strong commitment to continue to contribute, which is important, and also stereotypes about disabled veterans that are not necessarily positive. And with that, I'll invite you, Chad, please, to read this one.
Yeah, I struggle with anxiety a lot, and it's affected my ability to really how should I say this, start a new job. And my first task is something super simple like arranging chairs. For me, with anxiety and the military background, I was thinking I have to execute perfectly. Get the chairs in the most perfect 90 degrees square. They need to be in a very specific order, and I'll go through X number of preparation phases in my mind before I do anything at all. And that often becomes a block where ultimately nothing gets done.
So disabled veterans have really interesting experiences at work when it comes to disability. And in particular, we found it quite uncommon that veterans talked about how their disabilities affected them at work. We had veterans talking about how their disabilities affected them outside of work, for sure. But this quote was chosen largely because it was one of a very small number of folks who talked about, this is how my disability affects me at work. Nevertheless, it is experiences like this, right? Where you feel some sort of conflict, where you feel some sort of distress on your own. And that often will lead some people to seek an evaluation, seek counseling, seek help, seek medical treatment for the disability that they have. It is that sort of coming to that place where they say, look, this is more than I want to deal with on my own. For some folks, this is very dramatic, and this can involve, very, very high profile stories. And for other folks, this was just as simple as I was really struggling and I needed to get help. But it's that recognition of struggle. If you don't mind, please, again, Chad.
If resilience is not cultivated at all, if there's no battle buddy, no check-in, none of that, then veterans can start to go down a more hopeless path. If you're looking for a point of differentiation other than the environment or how it will happen, that's your differentiation.
Yeah. So one of the themes that kept coming up in the research was how important buddies were on the other side of service. So you've separated, moved into corporate America, or you're hoping to move into corporate America, and those buddies continue to be one of your strongest resources, right? So we talk about it sort of on a concrete level, helping people get jobs, but we also see buddies play a really important role in helping people seek medical treatment for what they need, right? If you don't have that battle buddy check-in, that can lead to a very different set of outcomes, according to this Pathfinder. I'll say for me personally, and this didn't come up in yet, I was a medic in 2004 and 2005 Iraq, and I came home, and it was a friend of mine. It was a former Marine from Vietnam who was like, yeah, you got to go get checked out. You got to go get yourself taken care of so that you don't find yourself down the line in the place that he had found himself in. And that peer support it's so hard to overstate the value of that, especially since we found over and over that buddy support, that peer support ended up being the thing that caught veterans when they fell through systemic cracks, right? When things that were supposed to work didn't work, it was the buddies that helped pick up the situation and improve it in very many cases. Please go ahead, Chad.
Yep. And saying, you know what, it's okay to hold the military accountable for things that you have. I don't think we do a huge disservice to ourselves. I think that we do a huge disservice to ourselves out of pride saying, yeah, my body hurts, but whatever, everyone's body hurts. No, it's not normal to be 39 years old and have a whole slew of issues. It's not normal to be 39 and feel like you're 60 when you get out of bed sometimes, especially when you're generally physically fit. I shouldn't be dealing with all of these things. I think getting out, it was difficult. It was difficult for me to identify as a disabled veteran. I just saw myself as a veteran who was receiving disability payments.
And this is where one of the sort of major friction points comes in with veterans and disability. Is so often the VA evaluation process is the sort of gatekeeper for whether you do or you don't have a disability. But because of the norms of that organization, of that institution, of that process, and how different those norms are and those standards are from military service itself. I'll again speak from my own experience coming out of the service. You know, I just like everyone else had stereotyped views of disabled veterans, and just like everyone else, you know, really didn't want to emphasize my own injuries or my own struggles or my own needs, right? And so when I had to go into the VA myself and talk about what I was struggling with, it was a huge change for me personally. And I think that change from concealing to being open is one that we sort of take for granted, and that a lot of people just expect veterans to navigate as they go through that disability process. But I think the reality of it is that it often takes time to understand your own disability. In any case, one of the things that I think is incredibly important, especially about this quote that Chad read for us, is holding the military accountable for the things that you have, right? For the changes in your body that have occurred as a consequence of military service. Oftentimes our bodies and our minds are treated in a way that leads to substantial changes, often for the worse. And so coming forward and making that shift from, oh, I have this idea in my head of a disabled veteran, and then now I'm going to be one, is confusing and distressing for very, very many veterans. And I'll say candidly for myself as well. Please.
Do you mind if I comment on that before we move on?
Go for it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to, from, again, self-experience similar to Lewis, is that, like, I always felt like I didn't deserve it, that my injuries, my battle wounds, my scars were just that. Like, it was part of the process. Like, that was what we did. That was what we were trained to do. And, like, I didn't actually even apply for benefits until I had been removed from the military for 20 years, because I felt that way the whole time, is that there were others out there that needed it way more than I did. But the reality of it is that when you get to that point where if I'm mentoring somebody and I'm telling them, hey, you need to go get looked at, but then I'm not doing it myself, I'm not living that same truth. And that's really when I had to take a hard look in the mirror, and then I applied for my benefits. So it is often looked at as something that we don't want to ask for help, but you know, in some cases you need it, because it's not what you need right now. Like when I'm in my early 40s, it's what I'm going to need when I'm in my 60s. And so if you're not thinking about that forward, with that forward looking lens, you're really doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Chad, because I think that really also underscores one of the really central points here about veterans being role models for other veterans as they go through this process. That was another thing that we found in this research that is not heavily represented here today, but certainly is in a lot of other places, that veterans helping each other was, and I said some of this before, but it was the most reliable support system that folks talked about, even if it was one of the least resourced ones. In any case, veterans develop new disability identities, but many of them keep them private. And if you don't mind, Chad.
Yep. Yeah, I usually don't tell people about the military. Like when I write it in my bio, I'll just say my other career and keep it moving. The reason is there are a lot of preconceived notions that we already mentioned. Like, how can you assume that just because you were in the Marines that you're going to be in the office doing push-ups? I mean, that is true. I sometimes do push-ups in the office, but you get what we're saying. And this might actually be my quote.
It could be. There's no way to know, Chad.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the key point here is that a lot of folks come to understand their disability. They come to understand how it affects their life. It comes to shape the things that they want to do and the things they want to avoid and the things that they care about and the things that they'd rather not chase down. And those identities are forged, but very often because folks don't want to be seen with that stereotype that we talked at the top about, folks will keep that identity private. I think it's important to note that this is one of the really central places where disability pride comes into the conversation. And I'm just going to talk about disability pride for a brief second as the opposite of shame, right? I know a lot of people sort of hear disability pride and they sort of struggle with this idea of like, how am I supposed to be proud of being disabled? And it is a bridge too far for a lot of people, and it is a bridge too far for many veterans. But not being ashamed as the opposite, right? That I think is the really central, really critical piece. So if you want to keep it private by all means, but that shame piece is one of those things that we find concerning and also something that we think buddies can address. So with this, I'm going to stop sharing screen for a moment, and I'm going to invite our wonderful panelists to come and share a little bit about themselves and their perspectives on this research. So we'll go to you, Chad, first, if that's all right.
Sure.
You had said you were, Marine in 2003 and were involved in the combat in Iraq. But you also have worked for the better part of 20 years at Fidelity. Many veterans land in corporate roles after service. And like we talked about, many of them keep their service and disability identities private. What does it mean for you to talk openly about where you are, and why do you do it?
Yeah. Well, I think it's, because as a combat Marine, somebody who was in a combat MOS and then like trying to figure out like, what's my next move? I started in security. So like the guy that's at the front door saying, hey, can you swipe your badge? Because at that time in my life, that's all I felt like I was qualified to do. And then through having mentors and friends in the company, they helped me realize that there's a lot more, that I can do more. I am capable of a lot more. And I think that's one of the other things about, military folks is that we tend to undersell what our skills really are. And we don't sell ourselves well. Because I saw a video the other day that really struck me, and they're like, you're a veteran if, and it was like, you're calm under pressure. You don't mind when people yell at you to get things done. You move really fast. You think in a line, and like rank, order of rank means something. So when your boss tells you to do something, you get something done. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm all those things. Because like that was stuff that was ingrained to us when we were in the military. And it took probably 5 years before I truly felt okay and that I belonged where in this company. But it wasn't the company's fault. It was actually mine. I had other preconceived notions about those people that were around me, and I was selling myself short badly. And so after I sort of no pun intended, got in my own way, things really took a completely different direction for me. And that's when I sort of started mentoring other men and women as well to tell them my story. Because I think one of the most important things about our community is word of mouth travels very fast. A vast majority of our community will pick a company, a product, or service based on word of mouth. And so we have to tell those stories of struggle. We have to tell those stories of failure's a bruise, not a tattoo, right? So it's just temporary. You have to keep trying different things. And I think, being able to be confident enough in who I am, but then also knowing that the company that I'm a part of is willing and able to look at cultural change at scale is incredibly important. And so to be part of that change has been really important for me. Just so you said, right, Pathfinder, people are going to see what I've done, and then unconsciously that gives them permission to do the same. And so you have to be able to be strong enough to do that, to give those other folks permission to follow you.
Yeah, that's incredible, Chad. Thank you so much. And if I could just sort of call back something that you said, or sort of rephrase something that you said, which I think is that, embracing a disability identity or talking about yourself as having a disability, not only is it not a source of shame, but it's also a gateway to helping other people that you care about, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. And with this, I'll turn it over for a quick second to one of my favorite people in the world, Lisa here, Lisa has done extensive work. I'm not going to read your whole CV out for the.
It's probably a good idea. You don't want people to fall asleep.
But Lisa has been involved in research around veterans and disabilities. She's been in program development for veterans with disabilities for years and years. And in some ways, when we started this project, I found her work and I thought, oh my God, if only I could get Lisa involved in this project. And one thing led to another. But at this moment, I want to just tap into to a piece of your expertise, which is having done extensive work around veterans and disabilities. What is it that veterans can gain from understanding and talking about their disability in new ways?
So that's a great question, Lewis.
Thank you.
So it's interesting because there's a lot of lessons to be learned from the disability community. The disability community spent decades, and I mean decades, moving from what was deemed a medical model where disability was something is broken and needed to be fixed, to a social model, which was the idea of really a lot of what disables someone isn't the impairment itself, it's the environment wasn't built with them in mind. That shift didn't take place until the disability rights movement of the 70s and the 80s. And honestly, the community is still working toward that next phase or the next stage, which would be true acceptance, where disability isn't just accommodated, but is really seen as carrying value. Veterans are going through their own version, veterans with disabilities are going through their own version of that shift, just compressed into a much shorter time frame, much shorter period of time. So if you think about it, most veterans or veterans with disabilities will start in that medical model mindset. Mainly it's because the system trains them that way. Think about the med board process, VA ratings, and even well-meaning families all frame it as something's wrong, let's fix it, get back to normal. So in the job search, that shows up as either hiding the disability completely because you're terrified it's going to cost you the job or job offer, or describing it in terms of a limitation. Here's what I can't do. A shift happens when a veteran realizes the more accurate question is, what did this experience teach me? And how does the workplace need to adapt, not just me? So practically, that reframing changes the job search and the experience itself. A veteran who can talk about their disability as part of, let's say, their operational experience, the discipline it took to retrain their body, the adaptability, the problem solving, is fundamentally a much different candidate than one who's trying to minimize or apologize for disability. And employers will respond differently. Veterans who've done that internal work also tend to ask for accommodations earlier and more confidently instead of waiting until they're struggling. So in a lot of ways, veterans are living out this same 40-plus year journey that the broader disability community took, but fast forward and in real time, and also searching for identity.
That's really wonderful. I'm going to turn it now for a moment over to the audience. I know there are a lot of folks just looking at the list of who's here who are knowledgeable about this topic, who are interested in this topic. I'd like to have a robust discussion if you can. Please, we'd love to have some of your questions in the chat that we can address, and whether that's from somebody who is deeply knowledgeable about this or it's somebody who is new to this conversation, all of it is welcome. So I'll pause for a moment and then try to take a question out of the chat.
And there were also, I believe, questions that came ahead of time when people registered. So I don't know if Allison or Dee want to pop some of those questions out as well.
That would be great. While we're waiting for that, one of the things that the findings that are going to speak, our findings are going to speak to in this next phase, are things that corporate employers can do to support veterans with disabilities. And it's complicated because, as we had said, very few veterans, self-ID or disclose at work. But also we know that a lot of veterans' needs that arise as a function of disability don't necessarily show up at work in some profound ways. So Chad, if you don't mind, while we're waiting for some folks, I'm curious to know what it is that your employer does that is helpful to you, or over the course of your 20 years at Fidelity, what are some of the sort of moments that have helped you feel included?
Yeah, I mean, so I used to work with a gentleman when I was in cybersecurity, and he had PTS a little bit worse than I did. And he was brave enough to mention it in one of our conversations, and he was really uncomfortable with not being able to, with people walking behind him in a certain office space. And so I had a conversation with one of my HR partners, and we were able to get his seat moved to like the corner of a building so that his back was to the window. And his attitude was night and day difference. We didn't know that he was that uncomfortable with people walking behind him. And so it was a small shift. Obviously we explained to the other person who used to sit there, and they were totally cool with it, and it was not a big deal, but a small change just by having somebody explain to us what was going on. And then a personal experience. So the headphones that I'm currently using are called Aftershock OpenCom. It is a bone conduction technology that you can wear so that I can still wear my hearing aids at work, so that I can still hear what others around me are saying to me, but I can also be on video calls because they're Bluetooth, they're adaptive technology, and our company has them directly in our online store. So if you need them, you can go order them, and they ship them right to your work address. So very, for me, game changer. I've had these for 3 years now, and it makes my life so much better than having to take my hearing aids out to put a headphone set in. My ears were really bothering me, and so I'm able to keep my adaptive technology with me at all times when I travel. So a couple of little small examples, but just amazing ways that our company continues to look at, either through a technology means or even through just a social means, to be able to facilitate some things that or maybe most people wouldn't even think about.
And Chad, just quickly, and I'm curious, did you need to disclose disability, or were you able just to find those earphones in this hub that Fidelity offered?
So I'm a runner, so I've been using these particular brand for quite some time. And then when I found out that they had a version for work, I asked about it, and they were like, absolutely, 100%. And then I worked directly with our supplier to put them on the Fidelity store. So it was through a discovery process that I found them, and then now they're available widely to the whole employee population.
And I think a lot of people also don't realize that employers are offering accommodations for the general population. So if there is a need, you just ask. And ideally, like the story that you just shared, it can happen for other people.
Yep, absolutely.
I just want to weigh in on that, because I think one of the issues very often that comes up around veterans and requesting accommodations for work is that very often veterans don't know what types of accommodations would even be helpful, right? Because so often we are trained and conditioned to adapt to what is in front of us, that the idea of sort of getting an accommodation can be a really tough one to sort of wrap your mind around.
Yep. Yeah, no, 100%. Like, I think, again, it goes back to you don't, or at least just from my personal perspective, like, I never wanted to feel like somebody had to do something special because I couldn't adapt, right? So, but then looking back on it, I probably would have made my life a lot easier had I discovered this 10 years ago, right? Like, I mean, now COVID did a lot of things for us because we adapted to our home environment, and now we're taking some of those same things back to the office place. So that was a big shift culturally for a lot of folks as well. But yeah, it a lot of it does go down to, I don't want to stand out. I don't want to be the outlier. I don't want to be that person. But I try to tell my folks now, I'm like, look, be that person, be disruptive, because you may inadvertently do something else that then changes how we all see it. And then now it's going to be easier for not just you, but for a whole lot of folks. So where I'm often trying to stay in that like disruptive, not from a negative perspective, but just like, let's look at things differently, right? Let's not necessarily just flow the mainstream because that's just how we've always done it.
But I think it's important for you to sort of embrace that disruptiveness also, because so often veterans are again, conditioned, trained to not rock the boat, right? To unit cohesiveness and all of that. And so I think the piece that you just said about, yeah, you could rock the boat, but a lot of veterans want to know, why would I rock the boat? And I think when we say rock the boat to help others, that's when we have something that actually means something, right? I think veterans rarely will rock the boat to help themselves, but will readily rock the boat to help other people, even non-veterans, right? I do want to go to one of the questions out of the chat. And I'll give it to you, Lisa. It's, how do employers balance disability inclusion with hiring the best candidate? I have a million thoughts on this one, and then
I saw that and had a million thoughts as well. So first and foremost, veterans are looking to hire the best candidate, period. So they're not looking through a list of people who come through and say, you know, I need to be included or I have a disability, and boom, picking that. They're looking to hire the best candidate. So you balance that with, or employers balance that, and the job seeker balances that by knowing what they want and asking for it. So the balance is really, it's a two-way balance. As an employer, I'm not going to know anything about what Chad needs when he comes into my workplace. He may not even know until he gets into the workplace. But as long as I've hired the best candidate for the job, I'm going to do everything as an employer that I possibly can do to make sure that he is doing his best job, because that will make me look better. So it's not really, I don't see it, and anyone else can obviously chime in. It's not really a balance, because it's always about the best candidate, but it's also the best candidate will know and be able to learn what they need and request it so that they continue to be the best employee.
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback on that just to say, I don't know why so often we hold these things as opposites. Taking the best candidate and hiring a disabled veteran. I mean, that presupposes that your best candidate is not a disabled veteran. And in many cases, disabled veterans could very well be the strongest candidate for any given job, right? And so I would say, more than anything, if you find yourself going, should I hire the most qualified person or the disabled person, and that's the question you're facing in your head, you probably did something wrong to get to this point, because so often that's the way we'd hate to see it sort of come down.
Right.
I'm going to jump to a question here about how we can take business communities to become a place, like, how do we build that place where disability is not a source of shame in business communities? And Chad, if you don't mind talking about sort of the communities that you're involved in around work, and the ways in which that's helped you understand disability is not a source of shame.
Yeah. I think it's having and being willing to have tough conversations with folks that don't share the same experience as you do. Along the way, I've been leaders of different affinity groups within the walls of Fidelity, the military group, and so on. And I found that when I was a leader, whether it was regional or national, like I learned the most when I talked to the people that were not like me at all. They didn't grow up in the same place. They didn't. They may not be the same religion or the same sex or age or religion or what have you. Because like just as we grow as human beings, you have to be willing to set your preconceived notions aside as well, because we're asking the same thing out of the military community, and dive in and really be willing and able to have those conversations and ask the tough questions, because that's where, at least for me, again, right, I live in that area of disturbance where I want to know, because I can't be an advocate or an ally to somebody if I don't understand where they're coming from. And so I think it's only fair to be that, right? Be vulnerable, be willing to have those conversations, because it's incredibly important, and you'll be surprised how much you'll learn, and then how much actual like empathy you'll be able to have at that point for others. And then you can jump into that advocacy role and say, hey, we should really think about this or this or this because of, and then you have sort of, in my world in technology, right, everything has to be a data-based decision making, but you need that information or that data to have and make an incredibly informed decision on some hard topics.
I really love that, because I think in this study we talk a lot about, we see it all over, buddies helping each other, right? And veterans helping each other, and the important ways. And we know that looks sort of one way in basic training. And then we know that looks a different way in combat. And we know that looks a different way, depending on other contexts. But I think what you just said, Chad, is really powerful to me, because I think you're talking about the ways in which we can support our buddies once we're on the other side of separation, which is often a very tricky thing. Like, how do you even connect? How do you get? But I think it's all those things that you talked about, including and especially vulnerability, which I think is a really great one. Lisa, I want to come to you and just to open sort of reaction to two comments in the chat about sort of the screening process and employers hiring the best talent, from Tiffany, and also from James' comment, who talks about having created resources within the company for different constituencies so that they can all sort of learn these things. What are some things that you learned about best practices in supporting veterans with disabilities at work?
Well, before I answer your question, because I was typing an answer to Michael Peacock in the chat, and my answer was going to be exactly what Jim Rossi pointed out, which was the best way to learn about veterans, period, or comma, veterans with disabilities, comma, people with disabilities, comma, is to interact with people. But there are things that in the workplace you're not going to say, hey, so Chad, do you have PTSD, or do you have, you're not going to go up and say, what is that like? So one of the best resources, and then I'll get back, Lewis, you'll reframe your question, because then I was reading and not listening to you, is the Job Accommodation Network, which I've been in the disability and veteran space I'm very happily retired now, but I just say 30 years. But it's been a long time. I started out in the disability community, found the military community that I had no knowledge of, felt like this was my place, and never left. So that in and of itself has been about 25 to 30 years. But the Job Accommodation Network, I believe the website is still JAN.org, is an incredible place for employers and job seekers to look for information about not only what disability is, what it's not, but also they give great explanations of what this looks like in the workplace. And they just offer a ton of resources. And if you're on this call and have never heard of the Job Accommodation Network, I would highly, highly recommend that you reach out to them And if you are a job seeker and you have questions and you might want to say, you know, I have a traumatic brain injury. I don't know if I need accommodations or what this even means or how to disclose or how to talk about it. They actually have people at Jan that will chat with you one-on-one. And they just do an amazing job. So I'll put that out there. And Louis, your question was?
My question was building on Tiffany and James' comments in the chat about specific programmatic elements that they've put in place. So James talked about creating resources for different constituencies within the sort of HR process. And Tiffany talked about sort of making sure that you're evaluating your screening processes so you're not losing good candidates as you go through. In my head, a lot of these things are good sort of talent acquisition practices, period. I'd love your thoughts.
Well, they are good talent acquisition processes, period. And the only way to create these processes, to evaluate these processes, to continue these processes is to reach out to constituencies within your organization. You may or may not know someone is a veteran because they may or may not have disclosed that they're a veteran. You may or may not know that someone is part of the military community. You may or may not know that someone has a disability that may not show up at work. So as part of a good talent acquisition community, you reach out to employees and say, we're looking for feedback here. We'd love for people with experience or have lived experiences to give us some feedback, or we're looking to create a new process. Who, amongst these employees would like to weigh in? Maybe I decide to do it for one and not the other, but you don't ever make these processes, or I shouldn't say you don't ever, because it does happen sometimes. You don't want to make these processes in a vacuum. I did not serve in the military. I will never make decisions or processes on behalf of veterans without discussing them with veterans to say, does this make sense? I want to make sure that I have no biases or hidden biases. So I think just being, open and transparent in terms of the reframing, the creation of, and the continual process of updating. It's just critically important that you're involving the lived experience of folks who are in your work.
That's terrific. That's terrific. And I wanted to sort of build a small little bit onto that, which is the sort of idea that we have in the disability community of universal design. And this curb cut effect, people may know it by, but this idea that if you design systems for folks who need them, and in the case of a curb cut, we take a wheelchair user getting onto a curb and you lower the curb for them, you create access to that curb for a bunch of other people, whether they have disabilities or not, right? So that might be a,
mother with a baby carriage.
I was going to say a parent with a baby carriage, but
okay,
all right.
Parent, even better.
But in any case, or even just, delivery people carrying packages, it's helpful, right? So it's not even necessarily tied at all to disability. But so often by focusing on folks with disabilities and designing processes and systems for them, we actually make the workplace better for everyone across the board, which is just the little...
And on that same, even I am always thrilled, and I saw it in Chad's video, when there are closed captions on videos. A lot of companies don't necessarily think, let's add closed captions because I may not need it, or you don't think about it. But having that as the process of let's make sure that it is as inclusive for all, that's not going to be just for someone with a disability. A lot of people learn better that way. So it is that effect, it is the curb cut effect of doing things that impact the greater good. But when you think about it from a disability lens, a lot of those processes do help the greater good. We just don't think about it that way.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna, because I do want to sort of try to wrap up by 3 on time. I'll just invite you, Lisa, first, and then Chad, any closing comments you have, and then I'm going to invite folks to take the survey. Actually, I'm going to put it up while you're speaking, if that's all right. The next phase of this research study is a survey. Basically, all of these findings that we had from all of these interviews we conducted, we have a number of things that we believe to be true, but we don't know on scale how wide they represent people's perspectives. So this QR code, and I'll also put the link in the chat, is there for folks who are disabled veterans, folks who are veterans who don't have disabilities, people who are not tied to the military but do have disabilities, folks who have none of the above, right? Civilians without disabilities. And the reason that we're doing this is because we want to really understand the disabled veteran experience as both a function of a disabled experience and as a function of a military experience. So with that, I'm going to turn it to you, Lisa. Any closing thoughts?
The only closing thought is if there's even a slight piece of information that you took out of this conversation today and said, oh, that makes some sense, share it with somebody. Share it when you get the video, share it with somebody. If you take the survey, share that link with somebody else, because none of this happens in a vacuum, and it only happens by telling someone else about something that you learned. So it's all really just about spreading education. So that's where I'll leave it. But Chad, I'm sure we'll have a much better, more insight than me. Pressure.
Yeah, I don't know about all that. Yeah, I think I'll just double down on sort of what I said. I hate being vulnerable. I'll just be honest. Like, that's one of the things I do the least. But what I said in my video, I meant through vulnerability, I find strength. I don't mind being a voice for some of the things that we struggle with. Like I said, sometimes you just look at yourself in the mirror and you don't like what's looking back, but being brave enough to be able to say that out loud and tell people that it's okay. I struggle too, but every journey starts with one step forward, and I just continue to take one more step because it's important, right? Like, we know that there's an epidemic of veterans, taking their own lives. And so we have to figure out what's next, right? It's going to be an ever evolving, ever changing ecosystem, because men and women that are getting out of the military now are facing different things than I faced when I got out. And so we have to be willing to look at those things and pivot and change as their needs pivot and change as well. And then one of the things I always tell people is the way I look at time, because time is the most valuable commodity in the world, because it doesn't matter how rich or how poor you are, you can never get any more. We all get exactly the same. And so with everyone being here today, you've spent time with us to hear these things and to listen to our stories, but meant you're taking time away from somebody else. So it's incredibly valuable to me as an individual. I thank you. I'm humbled and honored to be able to share some of this stuff with you in hopes that you can share it with somebody else. So thank you all for your time. Greatly, greatly appreciate it.
Wow, some great information.
Dee, I'm going to just wrap up my little piece and then I'll pass it to you if that's all right. I think for me, the real key takeaway from all of this is the extent to which, pushing through discomfort is a good thing and a bad thing, right? I know that for me, there have been times where I've put my head down and I've drive on through some stuff that I shouldn't drive on through, right? And then there's also times where I put my head down and I drive on through something and I'm happy I did. The key for me in telling the difference of whether I should be putting my head down and driving on, or, I was a medic taking Motrin and driving on, that the distinction for me is something that Chad said, is it helping somebody else? I do not want to endure discomfort for my own sake, but I'm entirely willing to do it if it's going to mean that it's helping a disabled person sort of get what they need, or a veteran get what they need, or both in some cases. Thank you for that. And then thank you to Lisa. Thank you, Chad. You guys, your contributions to this were incredible. Thank you so much. And with that, I'll pass it to you. Thank you, Dee.
Well, before we go to the rest of the day, and I think Catherine is here from Keys to Progress, if she is here, and since we have...
I am.
For those who want to hear about where we stand, and the Keys to Progress is trying to give away a vehicle to a veteran in every state. And so Catherine's going to tell us where we are with that.
Yeah, so I have an update. So for Keys to Progress is a program that Progressive does. We're looking to give away a vehicle in every state to veterans in need of transportation. We also do it for businesses and nonprofits as well. So businesses owned by veterans or nonprofits in need of transportation who are supporting veterans. So either one can apply. Our application is open until August 7th, so we are in our last push. I did get an update of some states where we do not have any applications that meet our requirements as of right now. So in a couple of these states, I'm hoping we can get some applications in, but Ohio, Tennessee, West Virginia, Wyoming, Vermont, Utah, South Dakota, Oregon, North Dakota, Louisiana, Idaho, and Delaware.
Oh,
So
we have a lot of opportunity.
We have a lot of opportunities here. So all of these states have no applications right now at this point. So if they do meet the qualifications, keystoprogress.com, please feel free. I know Allison has my email. We can put the email out. You can email keystoprogress@progressive.com for an application, and it'll come with kind of the expectations and rules for the application. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me.
Absolutely. And if you all know of any veterans, you can also send them to AWP. We have the application online at our disposal, and Allison and I will both put this out to all of our advocates and see if we can't fill those states.
Yeah.
Well, again, we'd like to thank Louis, Chad, and Lisa for their informative panel. This was excellent information. And our next battle rhythm is on August 3rd, and will be offered by the Wounded Warrior Project, so we hope you can attend. But I'd like to thank you all for collaborating and sharing. America's Warrior Partnership's ultimate goal is to improve the quality of life of all veterans and reduce the likelihood of veteran suicide by empowering those local communities to know all of their veterans and to serve them holistically before a crisis occurs. So America's Warrior Partnership model, community integration, amplifies local efforts by bringing the communities, veteran-serving organizations together to bridge those gaps in available services and by connecting local groups to national resources. So we believe communities are best equipped to improve the quality of life for our veterans. So we hope that today's battle rhythm provided you with powerful insight, best practices, new partners, and tools to do just that. So thank you all and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.